the Netherlands, country of windmills, tulips, and Vierwielandrijving, and from now on, a country of space exploration. Venus, a planet where no one has gone before. With a ground temperature of 462 Celsius and clouds of sulfuric acid. A planet that cannot sustain any kind of life. But a planet that can sustain 2 small robots. Introducing Table and Fork, the 2 rovers that will explore the planet's surface and collect rock samples to be analyzed. These robots will have to navigate the planet's surface flawlessly while avoiding hazards such as mountains and cliffs. But their main mission is to collect rock samples and bring them back to the lab. To this end, the finest, most expensive materials were used in their creation, and they were constructed with peak agility in mind. The edges of the training site and the cliffs will be delimited by black tape, and so, multiple infrared sensors were constructed to determine the changes in color and, thus guide the robot. 2 more infrared sensors were added in front of the grabber mechanism to detect the rock samples needed as they reflect infrared light. Mountains will be detected by the pre-made ultrasound sensor. A spoiler was constructed to increase downforce, thus boosting the robot's handling. As the rock samples needed do not absorb infrared light, a similar design of infrared sensors as the line-detecting ones were used to detect the rock samples needed. When the robot detects a sample using the infrared sensors placed on the grabber mechanism, it will open it, using a servomotor, and then drive forward and lift the sample. To detect the lines delimiting the training site's borders, the cliffs and the samples, multiple infrared sensors were constructed. These sensors use a photocoupler constructed from an infrared LED and a photodiode acting as a photoresistor. The output of this sensor is digital, consisting of either a 1 or a 0. This is achieved by using the operational amplifier as a comparator. To detect the lab, a beacon was constructed out of multiple infrared LEDs connected to a 6-volt power source. This beacon is powerful enough to be detected from a distance of up to 15 cm from the robot. A special infrared sensor was constructed to output an analog signal that indicates the distance from the beacon to the robot. To signal the position of the lab, an infrared tower was constructed. This tower uses a 555 timer to flash the LEDs with a certain frequency so that the tower can be distinguished from the ambient light. To power this tower, an array of batteries was constructed from 1.5-volt batteries, and it provides 6 volts to the infrared LED array. After the sample is collected and the robot detects that it is close enough to the lab, it will use its ultrasound sensor to find the entrance of the lab. This is done by differentiating between the walls along the sides of the lab and the empty entrance. It will then use the 2 black lines to steer itself inside the lab. When it reaches the end of the main section of the lab, the continuous black line will indicate that the rock sample needs to be dropped, and then the robot will begin to drive backward and exit the lab. The final configuration of the robot uses a modified infrared sensor, placed on top of the robot at a height equivalent to the towers, which can detect the distance from the robot to the tower. This is achieved by modifying the sensor so that it does not need an infrared LED or a comparator circuit. On the breadboard of the robot, the comparator circuit of the ground infrared sensors are constructed, and the sensors themselves are attached to brackets, keeping them close to the ground. The grabber mechanism is equipped with one pre-made infrared sensor to detect the rock samples needed. Pre-made sensors were chosen due to the need for consistency and efficiency. As the final preparations for their test mission are nearing their completion, we realize that we have to say goodbye to Table and Fork. They have been with us since the beginning of this course, but it is time to let them go. We wish them luck on their final voyage, without doubting for a second that they will make all of us proud.